Revenue and expenditure essentially remains the same, but as I mentioned to you under section 146, 147, standing appropriation consolidated fund for payment of certain salaries and allowances, all those people. Government must always make sure that they have adequate funding to ensure that the apparatus of the state keeps on functioning and that they are all accountable to their own offices, but are completely independent. We have also now a new provision, the Code of Conduct for public office holders, which is what I alluded to earlier on. And that's in relation to public office holders, as I highlighted, all those positions there. And there's a provision for protection of whistleblowers, specific constitutional protection for them, for the PSC, public service. F, which is we need to put in place a law for the annual declaration by the officers mentioned in paragraph A of the assets and liabilities and financial interests of the officer. One of the things we found that a few years ago that there was a person who was in the lands department, was probably earning a salary of about $30,000-$40,000, but I had about 7 homes. It was established that he did not inherit that. So your salaries needs to be commensurate with the amount of assets you hold. That's why under the prevention of bribery promulgation, the burden of proof has been reversed, which has been in place now for about 3-4 years, where if you hold assets that do not exactly equate to your level of income, it is your responsibility now to show, I'm talking about public office holders, your responsibility to now show as to how you acquired that. It's not for the state to prove it. Freedom of information, again, this is another which would apply to you also. Many of you, I know, make applications to municipal councils and town and country planning, LTA, Lands Department. These are some of the key agencies that there's a lot of people contact in terms of applications. You will now, once this freedom of information gets into place, which we hope to again by December, we hope to launch the Code of Conduct and Freedom of Information together, where you'll be able to access the decision-making process. So if you've applied for a development on a particular piece of land and town and country planning has rejected that, you will have the right to find out why. You have the right to then go and access the documents that led to that decision being made. This, of course, means that people who are making these decisions will know that somebody will be scrutinizing their work. And then also somebody will be able to know how they arrive at a decision. If there's any corruption, that will be eliminated, hopefully. When I mentioned this in another forum, somebody said, can we quickly have FERCA under this particular provision? That won't apply to FERCA at the moment. Auditor General's position has been strengthened, and the independence of the Auditor General, Reserve Bank is there. The emergency powers remain the same. Just very quickly, you know, there may be certain instances where we need to put in emergency, assuming and hopefully that it won't happen, but it's 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon and there's a huge tsunami that hits Suva. All of you are going home, and obviously there'll be a lot of dead people, there'll be a lot of vehicles, there'll be a lot of damaged buildings. What's going to happen? You need to put in place, for example, a curfew. You may need to restrict people's movement from looting, or there could be spread of diseases. This is the situation that is supposed to take care of that, because there are certain decisions will need to be made, and that's the procedure that's set out under that. The immunity provisions, they continue from the events of 1987 and from the events of 5 December 06. The immunity is given to any person who have held those positions under 157, and also whether in the official, personal, or individual capacity. But immunity does not apply to those sections of the Crimes Decree 133 to 146, 148 to 236, which includes things like corruption, bribery, murder, rape. There's no immunity for that. The immunity, of course, is entrenched, and we go into the next chapter, which is chapter 11, which is the amendment of the Constitution. And So the immunity provisions cannot ever be repealed, infringed, or diminished in any way. And of course, you cannot amend Chapter 11 itself. Otherwise, if you amend Chapter 11, you can amend the others. If you do want to amend the Constitution, there is a particular procedure. And for the first time, we've included a referendum within the Fijian constitutional framework. So if there is going to be an amendment to the Constitution, you must have Parliament approve it, and 3/4 of the members of Parliament must approve it. And then, that's not it. In the 1997 Constitution, you could amend the Constitution with 2/3 of the House of Reps and Senate agreeing to it. In this instance, it's 3/4, it's a higher threshold, plus after that, you have to go to the public, the people of Fiji. They need to agree to the amendment of the Constitution. And it's also a 3/4 threshold, but it must be 3/4 of the total number of registered voters. It's not 3/4 of the people who actually vote on the day, but 3/4 of the registered voters. Because you could have an American scenario. As you know, in America, probably only about 51% of the people actually vote in the presidential elections. 51, 53%, very lucky if they get 55. Fiji, generally, we've had a very high rate of voting, 75, 80, 85. In the last elections, of course, in one of the constituencies, we had a voter turnout of 101%. But there's something we can talk in another session. But it says 3/4 of the registered voters. Because 10, 15 years down the track, you could have, everything's going really well, the economy is doing well. If Parliament wants to, for example, make an amendment, you could have a lot of apathy. Only 100,000 people could just turn up to vote. So you effectively could have 75,000 people agreeing to an amendment to the Constitution when you could have a registered roll of 700,000 voters. So that obviously won't be fair and won't be right, and it won't be reflective of the actual views of 3/4 of the registered voters.